Welcome back to the Self Indulgent Podcast. I'm your host, Mariah. It is my first episode of the new year, 2025. I briefly talked about 2025 in my last episode. You should go check that out if you haven't listened already. But I didn't really reflect at all on 2024. So I wanted to talk about some things that I've learned in 2024. It was such a heavy year for me, very heavy, lots of crash outs. This was a challenging time for me. I feel like I go through these baby evolutions every quarter where I'm just not the same as I was previously. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting, right? And I think I'm starting to lean into this idea of you don't always have to be trying to grow, evolve, change. I don't always need to be healing. And I don't think we're always meant to be actively trying to heal. I talk about the work a lot, and I don't think that we're meant to just do it all the time. But with a podcast like this, it's called Self Indulgent, all about reconnecting with self, loving self, finding compassion for self, finding ways to prioritize that relationship because that relationship is going to be essential to where you go in life. We tend to be neglected a lot. Balancing that and trying to show up here while also coming into this realization that I would like to start balancing being present in where I'm at right now and being okay with that, but still talking to you guys about things that matter. I was listening to a podcast, the Diary of a CEO podcast, where a neuropsychologist or a neuropsychiatrist was being interviewed. He talked about self help. I'll link the episode below because it was really helpful help for me. I need to re listen to it. He talked about the self help stuff. And somebody who constantly is listening to the podcast, reading the books, and not finishing often, but constantly going for information and self improvement, a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism. The message that can be unconsciously sent sometimes is I am not enough right now. This version of myself is not okay. I need to change it. We have to be more balanced and recognize that it's cool to learn new things, want to heal and do better, change behaviors, habits, and patterns, especially ones that have been harmful. But how do we balance that with being present, living life, and showing self compassion when we can't make all the changes at once? That is one of the lessons of 2024 that I've learned towards the tail end of it. I think there's some other things I've learned in this last year. In this conversation, want to talk about play. And that's it's another lesson that I've had this year. It is what urged me to sit in front of the camera and do it because I almost didn't, but we're here. It is what motivated me to talk about it because I'm finding a lot of importance in this concept of play. I'll get back to that later in the episode. I wanted to set my intention for today's episode. Almost forgot again, but I did not pre-write these this time, so just gonna do them with you now. So my intention for today's episode is to give myself the space to mess up, take a break, gather my thoughts if I need to, and allow whatever comes up to come up, even if the direction of the episode takes a little bit of a turn, to show up with love and compassion and to teach somebody at least one new thing or lesson that might help them in their journey. One of the first things I've learned this year is this idea of contrast. The universe doesn't test you, it reflects you, kind of thing. Basically, the external is a reflection of your internal state. I think I've understood deeper now this idea of contrast. If something is not in alignment for you, it might create discomfort. Anytime we're experiencing discomfort, pain, things like that, it's often meant to show, like, hey, maybe this isn't for you, or maybe this isn't, it's a signal of where you should be going. If this was painful, then maybe it wasn't for you. Now, I'm not talking about anxiety, fear based things. I think it's important to explore fear based feelings because those are the types of things you might need to lean into. Question, is this driven by self doubt? Is this driven by lack of confidence? And do I actually deeply still desire to do it? Because then the contrast could be that you want to do this thing, you're not doing it, and now you have anxiety and you're uncomfortable because you're not leaning into it, right? There's the contrast. It's like, hey, you should be leaning into this thing and you're not allowing yourself to do. So let's explore the fear, self doubt, self judgment. It's meant to show us what we do want versus what we don't want, right? Contrast can be really guiding you to what is meant for you and helps drive this feeling of intuition and strengthening your intuition and bringing clarity. Something else that I've learned this year is the idea of resistance, meaning that it feels unsafe. That was a big change in a shift for me because I briefly talked in my last episode about resisting life. And I think I've thought about why am I living in my head so much? Why does it not feel like I'm actively living and fully present? And I think some of it comes from feeling unsafe. There's lots of resistance in different areas of my life where I constantly feel trapped. Understanding resistance means that you feel unsafe. When you feel resistance, it is likely that you are feeling unsafe. That was a really helpful reframe because it allows for deeper exploration of why do I feel unsafe? What is really causing the discomfort? Is it because I'm judging myself? Is it because I don't trust myself? Is it because I'm worried about the outcome? What about the thing feels so unsafe? Let's explore that. When we're noticing resistance, I think can be really helpful and insightful in some of the motivation behind the behavior, avoidance, procrastination, all that stuff. The next thing I learned is that it's okay to be different and do different than others. I think that as somebody who I have a Gemini rising, so I would constantly look for information. When I was talking about self-help stuff and getting all that information as a coping mechanism, that's me. I was talking about me. That's why it hit home so hard. Constantly I'm looking for answers and how to do the thing. Anytime I'm interested in trying something new, I will go on deep dives for hours. I'm also a Virgo, so that's part of the planning, organizing, looking into it. I need to know how everything works, how other people are doing it. It creates this belief that I need to understand what's acceptable before I do things, or that I need to make sure things are going to be perceived or accepted by others. And that's just so we'll come back to play because a lot of these points will come back to play. And I think that's why I wanted to talk about play, but first go through these lessons because I think play can bring a lot of relief. If you want to start a podcast, just start the fucking podcast. It's okay to look up one or two things or get inspiration or motivation from others, but they're not going to carry you through the work. For me, what gets me hyped for the gym? Sometimes when I look at girls lifting heavy shit, it motivates me. I be wanting to go to the gym. I don't know if it's because I have really large thighs. Anytime I see a girl flexing her thick ass muscular thighs or quads, I'm like, I need to go. Stairmaster, sign me up, but I don't actually do the Stairmaster. Incline walking, that's my thing. Stairmaster, maybe one day, not today and not tomorrow. But I find other ways to do it. You can do different than others. Just because they're doing a Stairmaster warm up for quad day, I walk on an incline to get something similar, but in a different way that is comfortable for me. Recently, the incline has been burning out my shins. I've never had this issue before. Usually I'm able to do an incline at a 3 to 3.4 speed walking on the treadmill. Recently, my shins are on fire. I don't know if it's that I had taken a month off and redoing it is aggravating it. I've been stretching like I'm supposed to. So I don't know. We gotta figure that out. But anyway, the point was do different than others. Do it your own way. You don't need to do it the same way that other people do it. You just need to figure out what works for you. And if you need a little bit of guidance, that's fair. There's nothing wrong with getting a little bit of guidance, but if it's stopping you from taking action and feeling good about it, then we need to reassess. We need to understand why we feel that way and allow ourselves to just do. I also realized that When we wear these masks, it's natural. We've been conditioned from childhood. That was the closest we were to true self in childhood when we had no conditioning, no influence. We get older, taking on our parents' influence, peers' influence, society's influence. If you've had adverse experiences with parents and friends, they're really formative. It really messes you up. And then you create these masks, right? That is determined on what you have found to be acceptable by others based on your environment growing up. You probably have a different mask. I have different mask. There's a different mask at school. I wear a different mask at work. And then sometimes when I come home with my partners, which is something I've realized. What I've come to learn is that you can also wear a mask to yourself. Like you can be masking to yourself, not just wearing a mask for others. Some version of the masks are staying on, even to yourself. You're hiding from self. Sometimes when you don't want to be seen or are so fearful of how you're being going to be perceived, you hide from yourself. You don't allow yourself to see yourself. And I think it's important to be able to show self the wide range of who we are so that we can show up with love and compassion. If you're noticing that you beat yourself up, there's the work. Like you got to work on befriending self. Whenever I'm going through something difficult or I'm not feeling like myself, I don't always do it right. It's hard to remind yourself to do these things when you're in the height of emotion. You don't even have the brain capacity to access that sometimes, but when I can, I try to envision me as a 7-year-old version of myself. That has allowed for me to show up very different in support and compassion for whatever I'm experiencing. If I'm envisioning it as the 7-year-old version of myself, way more tolerance and compassion for whatever reason, it's what works for me. It's similar to the concept of would you say that to your best friend? That doesn't work for me because my best friend is not me. This is what I mean, different than others. Would I say that to the 7-year-old version of myself? No, I would not. If it helps, pull up a picture of a younger version of yourself. It'll make you check yourself like, whoa, I should fix how I was saying that. So overall, when it comes to that, work on being you, work on being real with yourself. I think I mentioned a few episodes ago, Justin Schumann, he's big on using social media as this way to practice being you because there's nobody in this room with me right now. It's just me and the camera and the screen. And that's a great way to practice being yourself because you can try to remind yourself that you're not performing right now. I don't have to post this. It would suck because I spent time on it, but I don't have to post this. So if I feel that I'm not being authentic, I can choose not to post this and just fuck around and find out, right? So it's a great way, I think, to even if you never post anything, like exercise to be able to try to practice being you. And that's his whole thing. A really great opportunity to show how to just be authentic. It's not like you're going on stage and doing public speaking. How about we get the foundation of being self? And this is very low stakes. It doesn't have to go anywhere. Nobody has to see it. So yeah, if you're having a hard time connecting with you and being authentically you and taking the mask off, at least for yourself first, that could be a way to do it. This past year was big for me, realizing and recognizing that I am building my foundation, right? I am not at my final destination. And my final destination, quite honestly, is not going to be until death. And I think that's hard to conceptualize because the 20s feel so serious. And I'm sure the 30s and 40s feel serious as well. There's something uniquely intense about the 20s, though, in that you're transitioning into adulthood. Amount of responsibility is going to pile on quickly. This economy and this state, more people in their 20s, 30s are moving back in with their parents than we've seen in the last few decades. Prices are going through the roof and pay is not changing. Degrees are mattering less and it's becoming more competitive. Now it feels like you have to get the doctorate to be able to get high paying job, but then you're in a bunch of debt, right? So it it is challenging. It is a challenging time to be in your 20s and 30s. And so I think I've put a lot of pressure on myself to have it together, right? My friends are constantly like, "Are you okay?" Because of the amount of pressure that I put on myself to perform and do. It particularly is bad when I beat myself up on not doing the thing, right? It was very hard for me to not do the podcast for so long. I felt really bad about it, even though in hindsight, I had to take a break. I needed to step away because I was crumbling. Moving through that experience, I realized my best friend helped me with this concept of building your foundation. And it's really hard right now. You care a lot about showing up for self differently than previous generations, changing your life in ways that you had not, breaking generational trauma, and you're in grad school trying to do the podcast and seeing clients and not giving self any credit for it because it feels like it's not enough or I'm not reaching a destination, right? What am I beating myself up over? Nothing has happened. What am I trying to make happen that feels like it's not enough now? Being able to ground myself in the idea that I'm building my foundation. I am going through these really difficult periods. I'm building a foundation to stand on moving forward, right? I think the 20s is a time where you completely crumble any foundation you had previously because it largely came from your family and maybe even friends growing up or just those experiences. And you kind of have to bulldoze it down in your 20s because life changes so much. And then from then on, you're constantly trying to rebuild it. And I think what I've also learned is that when you're rebuilding, be as intentional as you can about gluing your bricks together with like love and compassion, because you don't want a faulty foundation, right? Like, I ain't go through all this pain to not have a strong foundation. Lots of pain, lots of discomfort, sadness, confusion, lostness, right? So if I'm going to live through all that, as I'm rebuilding, I got to be rebuilding it with the good stuff. So the last thing I want to talk about before we move into the conversation on play is I've learned that it is really me versus me. It's you versus you. Life is entirely, when you really get down to the nitty gritty, you versus you. Adverse life experiences, trauma. It's always your relationship to it. What it means to you, the stories we create, that will determine behavior and further experiences and the perpetuation of those feelings and experiences. It's our relationship to the thing, which is why a crazy car accident for one person could be extremely traumatizing and for another, it wouldn't. So it's your relationship to the thing. Now, specific types of traumas are horrific and they do something to you. The brain rewires, nervous system is dysregulated. As time passes, it will continue to be your relationship to the experience, to the trauma. And this is why PTSD is a thing. It's like you're living in the past. You're reliving the past. You're not living presently because you're reliving these experiences from the past. And that's why a lot of the work is to help process it so you can move on from it. Your relationship to the trauma, to the event changes. The event will stay the same. The trauma will always be there. Your relationship to it, how it activates you, is what changes. And so, you versus you, me versus me. I made a TikTok the other day about how anxiety is really crazy because it always reminds me that it's me versus me. In a matter of 30 seconds, I can freak myself the fuck out on shit that did not happen. It never happened. When you really sit and reflect on the thought spiral you just had, that did not happen at all. None of those things I just thought actually happened. I don't even have proof or evidence for half of it. I can have suspicions, be paranoid and hypervigilant. I have ideas and concepts, but none of it was confirmed. Even if I had suspicion that my friend was mad at me or people were talking behind my back, it's still my relationship to it, right? That's making me freak out. Because if they're talking bad about me, I don't need them in my life anyway. When you really think about it, you can take yourself outside of it or even somebody else in those shoes. Because, like, what would you tell the 13-year version of yourself, right? If you had people talking shit about you. What would you tell if your 13-year-old version of yourself came to you and said, I think that, they're talking really badly about me. They were laughing when I came in the room. Like, I don't know that they actually like me. What would you tell them? Fuck them. That is what you would tell them. That is likely what you would tell them, right? Or the way that people go to bat for celebrities, like Selena Gomez fans. What are they, Selenators, Swifties, the Beehive? They go crazy for anybody who talks sideways. I need y'all to channel that for yourselves. When you can start being your defender, your biggest supporter, and your biggest cheerleader, right? All that other stuff won't matter. Your relationship to things will change because you got you, right? So no more you versus you. We need to move into it's me and me. I got me. You know, we're a team. We're in it, locked in, because you locked in with you for the rest of your life. It needs to become a friendship, not frenemies. Pure friendship. If you can remind yourself when you go into those thought spirals or you're having a hard time and frustrated with yourself, remember it's you versus you. Or if you catch yourself in the spiral and just be like, none of that happened. And even if it did, that's the added work. Even if what I'm thinking became true, doesn't matter. I still got me to the day that I die. Even if they were talking shit, even if I failed that test, I got me. It doesn't mean anything more than I failed the test and they were talking shit. That's all it means, right? So working on the relationship to the thing and not fighting yourself in your head about shit. And fabricating all these stories and stuff. Okay. And now I'm going to sum it all up with play. You might be like, Mara, what do you even mean by play? I'm talking about all the things that play would include, just doing shit for the hell of it. Anything fun, anything new you're trying, anything new you're exploring without expectation or judgment, right? Just doing it to have fun. Who was the best players? Player sounds horrible. Who was the best at play? The child version of you. They were the best at play. Even through some scary shit, even if you've been through trauma and things like that, the child version of you found a way to play. There was, make the fun out of little, right? That version of you, like kids can make a fucking mansion out of a box. Like they often kids will prefer a cardboard box over the shiny glowing toy, right? Because the imagination is so expansive and we lose that, man. We lose it in our 20s. We think about having everything serious real quick. All of the responsibility, and in this hustle culture it constantly feels like we have to do. Time starts to feel like it's breathing down your neck. Grade school, middle school, high school, it took forever. And then all of a sudden, you're like, what the fuck is going on with time? Time is just moving and it feels really hard to keep up with it. So it feels like you have to take every moment. Then you crash out and burn out and don't do anything and you feel guilty for not doing anything. So you've been this really crazy loop of being miserable. And I think that play can actually be a remedy for a lot of that stuff. You connect with self. It is going to create a different type of relationship with self because when you play, you explore, you try new things, you allow for things to get messed up or not go as you planned. You're allowing yourself and giving yourself the freedom for safety and to just play around in it with no consequence. What does that sound like? And what does that remind you of? Secure parenting. Secure attachments. That is actually what is coming to mind right now. You are creating a secure attachment with self when you play, when you allow yourself to play, when you give yourself the space to play and allow it to go however it's going to go with no expectation and judgment. That is how you heal part of your relationship with self. It is essential to our well-being and fostering more trust to just be able to live again, to be present, to live less in one's mind. I'm in a clinical psychology program, so it's constant analyzing and conceptualizing. And I'm a Virgo, like I said, and a Gemini rising, and a Sag moon. So I feel things deeply, intensely. That combination when I'm on the low road is difficult. I have to think my way through all of it, and it just doesn't work sometimes. It becomes obsessive, the recipe for anxiety. I'm trying to lean into play more. I think for me, 2025 will have to be about play and accountability. Owning me, owning all the things I talked about in my last episode, owning past, present self, being excited for future, and owning it all, whatever comes, it comes, and playing more. Like recently, I started singing again. That's something that I was obsessed with when I was younger. Right around when I was ending high school, I was working, thinking about starting college and all that stuff, having my own job, making my own money, going to college, figuring out what I want to do, being super interested all of a sudden in psychology and finding new ways to understand myself. It was really nice and fun in the beginning for me. And then it got more serious, right? Like, then I had to move out. Then I decided to go to grad school. Then I'm practicing and seeing, having therapy clients and doing testing. It is transitioning to the career piece of it, right? Everything is getting real serious. The stakes are really high. It is no longer fun. The piece of me that I think still has the fun, though, is the piece of me that listens to the podcast and likes learning new things. I did exercise science in another life because I find that stuff so interesting, understanding the body. I think I'm still getting some play in that, right? Because I'm a lifelong student. Again, Gemini rising. I love learning shit. So I think that's kind of how I get that. The problem and where it starts to teeter is when I start to take it too seriously and am trying to implement 12,000 things into my life at once and then frustrated with myself when I don't do it. That's where it's like, all right, girl, relax, breathe. During that young adulthood time, I was just like, yeah, I'm okay not singing. I was really dedicated and invested and really wanted to do big things at one point with it, but it's not for me. I don't have the most incredible voice. It's average. I'm really feeling this stuff now, so it's okay to let it go. But the hints and pieces of self-doubt drove me away from it, I think. It was so unconscious though, because I remember at least 3 different times throughout that period saying to myself, wow, I think I'm okay giving up singing. I'm okay. And it's so funny because it was just like, why not just keep singing? You love doing it. So it was just these moments of giving up these parts of self, even if it was going to continue to just be for play. So it's something I'm refinding now, and it's really cool because my voice has matured and I am able to do more than I ever thought I could with my voice. And it's just fun. I'm doing some online courses to help practice strengthening my voice because it never dawned on me that I can teach myself. I always was like, oh, I'm never going to be able to have a vocal coach. Blah, 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 I can't afford growing up. And so it's like you can find some stuff online to practice learning how to warm up your voice. There's just so much play that can happen there. And I'm excited to do that just for myself. I think what's the most powerful thing about play is that it doesn't have to mean anything for the rest of your life. It is strictly for the enjoyment to just fuck around and find out. You gain so much in fucking around and finding out and developing the secure attachment with yourself. And that I think is what allows for freedom in life, right? I think we're meant to play as humans. I think we're meant to be creative and just do things without all these exterior, societal, capitalistic outcomes. You can just do it just to do it. And I think there's a lot of healing that comes with that. That is some of the lessons I've gotten from 2024. I'm sure there's more. I am looking forward to 2025. This first week of 2025 was a little weird for me. I was feeling a little off, falling back into similar thought patterns of like, even today, like, oh, what am I going to talk about next? I like feeling like I'm not passionate about anything right now when I was really passionate a few weeks ago about life and doing all the things, but understanding that you're not going to feel super passionate all the time, right? We all have ebbs and flows. We have hormones. There's just so much in the human experience and being patient with myself through it and taking care of myself again, practicing compassion and self-love. If I wouldn't say it to the 7-year-old version of myself, I am not allowed to say it to this version of myself. I think that's another piece. I want to own it all and surrender. I don't need to control everything. For me, it never comes out the way that I wanted to anyway, so I gotta let it go. It takes up too much space in my brain and energy. In the comments below, let me know some of the lessons you've learned this last year, or in general, that even if they're just themes or messages that are recircling and repopping up in your life that is like really salient for you now, and how you want to move forward intentionally for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be just, oh, what do I plan for 2025? No, for the rest of your life, right? I think it's cool sometimes to give years themes. 2024 was a year of reflection and breaking down to rebuild. It was just like, oh my God, it was like, yeah, everything got to go down. We got to start this over. We got to explode, implode, reflect, and then rebuild. That's the theme, the vibe that it gave. I hope you guys are having a great start to your new year, and remember to show yourself some compassion. Just because we're in a new year doesn't mean some of the stuff you were dealing with before the new year isn't there. So I think giving yourself compassion and time always to show up the way you want to show up is important. That's all I got. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this somewhere else, give me a follow. And if you enjoyed this episode, give me a 5-star review, please. It helps a lot. And I will see you guys next time.